So it is, little ones, we talk to you. Yes, emotions. We love emotions. Emotions put the whole world into a movement, a way in which the human can participate more graciously in their world. It doesn't matter what the emotion is. It's just a matter of complying to all the aspects of oneself that are available for perception. And so even though each one has a different way to perceive their world, and that there are different interpretations that come through the past experiences that each one has had, or come from the moment of the impressions that are latent but very present in the moment because they're being elicited. And so these particular moments on the planet of Earth are eliciting for each one that part of themselves that is open, awake, and aware to healing on this planet. And it may seem as though not just one conflict or one challenge or one way in which you need to be obedient to your divine self is making itself known, but they may be all three at once, maybe even more, and therefore they're all the aspects of each and every one of you who are listening that are subject to a huge amount of vibration. It's as though tsunami is coming with the emotions for the human, and the human will hold those emotions as best they can, or how they have been trained, so that they can feel the stability of their core self in the physical body. So feeling the stability of the core self in the physical body is not necessarily anything that you need to move through. It isn't anything that you need to change. It is a way in which you accept what is happening and give yourself a permission to move forward at this time. So the acceptance that you have had many other lives, you may not know it, you may not have experienced it, it may not be your direct experience, you may not have had gratitude for the infinite being that you are, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So give yourself permission to recognize that part of yourself that is anticipating a lot of the time, is ready to wake up in the morning and has either hesitancy or is ready to jump into action like a small child. And both of these are valid. Both of these are a result of the emotional core or stability in the human being for the moment. So this whole exercise, which is called COVID, pandemic, ways in which the darkness is opening itself and is allowing itself to be seen. All right, so the shadow aspect is coming forward, and of course, the more a shadow aspect comes forward, it's absolutely going to hit the light. You can't move around on the planet and not hit the light, never hit the light, because the sun comes in on one side of the planet or the other. So the light is there. It's just a matter of keeping on, as the expression moves itself in that way. So when we talk to you and you recognize that there are certain aspects of yourself that are not in accord with the experience that you're having, that you're holding back, then recognize, yes, we want to say not that there is work to do, but there is breathing and acceptance, acknowledgement of the sense of self that is feeling, and let's use the word threatened at this point in time. It may not be that serious all the time for someone, but the feeling of being overwhelmed or overtaken, overpowered, or underrated, or underestimated, or under the pressure of, these are all the same. They are ways in which the human, as a human being with a body, is feeling the pressure of the vibration of third dimension. And third dimension has its own ways in which it allows certain aspects to open into the moment with observation. So there are, third dimension is, you can hear third dimensional sounds for the most part, or reverberation, but for the most part the third dimension has to do with being able to see and be able to see three-dimensionally, and now expanding your ability to see holographically is taking into fourth and fifth dimension and a greater state of awareness. So as you know that there are certain things that are not as they were, let's say last year or last week, certainly not when you were a child. Certainly the life has seemed as though there are more things to look at, more ways to think, more collaborations to experience, more complications to be in the mix with everything. And that's part of the mind. And so the mind has become very active with so much information, and recognizing that this is the age of information, and you get a choice of what information you're going to allow into your world, what you will absorb, is questionable, because for the most part, whatever it is that the spirit or the soul needs to re-experience is going to be experienced subliminally, is going to be accepted under the guise of something else. It's going to be like a symbology or a secret. And so it seems as though there have been a lot of secrets on the planet of Earth, a lot of ways in which people have communicated, even in the family, between the mother and the father. They communicate in their own way, and the children are not really privileged to know what's really going on with the parents or what's really going on with the extended family. And so now you carry that out in your own relationships, personal, that you have now. You're carrying on your own relationships and your own relationship to yourself. And even though each one has their own way of perceiving, in the long run, everything is a guiding instrument for the awakening, the freedom, the release, the sovereignty, acceptance of the totality of the being. So these are strong lessons right now. They have usually only come when death is at the doorstep. If someone is feeling like they're going to die, they may have their ways in which they take their experiences and they say, oh, forgive me, or they go through that and they want to be forgiven for whatever has happened, so the recollection is happening. But for the most part, it's what cannot be remembered that is being experienced in the physicality, in the emotions, and in the reactionary patterns. So these reactions. Now, in order to feel in control of one's life, they may subdue their reactions, but that doesn't mean they aren't there. Right? So someone's beginning to work with the spiritual world, and they have certain concepts, ideas about what it is to be spiritual. They may end up suppressing, let's say, anger, or suppressing a spontaneous reaction because they want to fit in to the paradigm of their spirituality. But that's not necessarily the truth of how it is they are feeling or what is going on inside. So these moments are for truth. They are for you to be awake for yourself, for your own truth. And only in doing so, as we say now, can you acknowledge your totality, yes, or can you begin to accept yourself totally. And that acceptance of self is for the person, who you have thought you are, what your psychology is about, what your physiology is about, what your biology is about, and what the instrumentation of fifth dimensional telepathy is about, all those things that are get intuitive. And this is still not who you really are. You are a being, a divine being of light, and to acknowledge that is one way of saying yes to it, but to experience the acknowledgement means that one must have stillness in their life, and they must practice the presence, like be in a snapshot of the moment, and realizing that yes, there is life happening in a plant that you're watching grow, but you can't see it. Doesn't mean it's not happening. Yes, there is advancement or a protraction happening in a certain experience, but you can't see it, nor can you taste it or touch it, because it is subtle. And it is the subtle world that has the strongest impulse, the strongest influence, that's the right word, onto the reality at this point. So if you didn't have a cell phone with subtle energies If you didn't have the computer, the Wi-Fi, subtle energies, you wouldn't be able to be doing what you're doing right now. So just acknowledge it from that point of view. It's like, yes, that's how it is in my world now. I make use of subtle energies. But do I recognize myself when I am sending out subtle energies, subtle impressions, when I am drawing to myself certain impressions or certain long ago influences, or drawing on a subtle reality that is influencing the entire world? And that's pretty much what's happening now. There are subtle realities. Now, still the dimensions exist, and still when you're in third dimension, the opposite and the polarities do exist. Fourth dimension as well, but there's a little more experience, expression, expansiveness in the fourth dimension. And getting into fifth dimension, there can be some explanations, some symbology, some representations that relate to the third dimension, but it's still more difficult to really acknowledge all that. So know that you yourself are one with this universe. How do you do that? You recognize that, well, you may have clipped your fingernails last week, but still they may need clipping again. Why? Because life is happening whether you are paying attention to it or not. Yes? And breathing and the heart beating, we talk about that a lot. But there are those progressions of life that are in your body, that is a body that is locked in time for the most part because of the ideas, concepts, relationships that you have known, and the tendencies due to the birth that you took on this particular planet at this particular time. So to just acknowledge that and to be with it is a step in the greatest direction of recognizing that life is happening through you. You are not making it happen. You may try to wield your world in one way or another. Directions, results are usually largely dependent on past experience and what is happening in the moment, in the meantime. Each time a person makes a projection into the future, it is registered. It is tabulated, but it may not come around to that person. It may just go out into the ethers and come around to someone else. That is always a surprise when that happens. So keeping in mind that you are mostly a subtle being. You have the body. It is the densification of your beliefs and all those things we have just talked about. And that the relationship that you have with your body, if you're lovely with it, if you acknowledge that it has certain needs, that you recognize there are certain principles on the physical plane that need to be followed in order for the body to be sustained, not to sustain itself, all right? It sustains itself through subtle energies and prana. But what you contribute to it is important, but most of all your attitude about what you're contributing to it. So if there's fear and you're eating something that tastes really lovely and wonderful, you may have less of an ability to digest that. You understand that principle as well. So give yourself permission now and forever to recognize that the direction to be pointed in from your inner core is to that part of yourself that is the inner core, that doesn't have any memory, that is just pure observation, that doesn't have a way in it is judging or criticizing or monitoring what you're doing, whether it is you should meditate more or you should exercise more or you should do something less. All that is still the ego. It isn't even driven by the soul. All right, so the soul is totally separate from that. And to give yourself that awareness that the polarity, the density, the masculine and the feminine are both consciousness, right? That before they become a body or a relationship on the physical plane, they are a consciousness and they have certain vibrations to them. So the masculine consciousness is choiceless. It's very powerful and it's omnipresent, all right? Choiceless. It doesn't make choices. That's the original male quality. The female quality is creative and she can make choices. So that's what makes the feminine so much more obvious, and the feeling of power that goes along with the feminine. Feminine is very, very lovely, and it's not the end-all be-all, because without the sun shining, because the sun is the masculine and the feminine would be the earth, without the sun shining and throwing light, there would be no growth. There wouldn't be any little plants that were growing or humans that were feeling as though they had enough health or sustenance in their body. So know that, and remember, going back to basics is one thing, but going back to your original self is another. And that means consciousness, part of self that is making choices. You're in your feminine, yes. Part of you that's just being there and just watching is what's called the Purusha, or is just the observation of the self. That's still not the soul. It's the part of self that is making choice to be in that mode. And beyond that, there is the part of yourself that is capable of not reporting into you, all right, because you wouldn't be able to deal with that at all the way the soul reports in, but it's able to be a participant every single instant, moment, every time you are in time and space as part of a holding together, all right? So it's not holding in a specific pattern. Soul doesn't want to do that. Soul will hold together like jello, or pudding, or something that is, it's substantial in one state, or cake batter before you bake it, etc. It's movable. And so that aspect of yourself that is very movable, that is soul, is a guiding force. And you want to be able to tap into that guiding force that goes beyond any of the concepts or ideas you've had about yourself. All right? These are very important factors, because in this moment, everything is changing on the planet of Earth. And if one is carrying a conclusion around about what is good and what is bad, they're going to be sorely interrupted with their peace. All right? The peace is not going to be there, because you're going to have a basis for choice from the mind that says this is good, this is bad, I like this, I don't like this. But if you're open like a small child that's just wide-eyed, and you come upon a new policy or a new way of being on the planet of Earth, or a new invention that you've never seen before, something you've never encountered before, if you're just open, your acceptance level is going to be much more quickly obvious to you, and therefore you can participate or not participate with what is, but you come from a place of absolute awareness, which is not something that you can do ordinarily. If you are in your mind, you can't come from absolute awareness. So you are awareness, and you have the physical body in time and space, and you have these concepts. It's the choices. Am I going to pay attention to my concepts? Am I going to pay attention to my body? Am I going to pay attention to A, B, C, or D? That's what we're going to say. So you get now to the key of what is life all about. It is about coming into this reality in time and space with duality, and making the observations from a neutral place, for lack of better words, to guide you into a place of peace and a place of bliss. Putting yourself in position by being in this particular incarnation in order to unearth the limited beliefs and the limited concepts, all the limitations of your history and your past. And there are so many details of what the truth of the matter is about the earth plane and all the things that have gone on your planet that aren't even in history books. They aren't being discussed, and people are too frightened to recognize there may be something bigger than them. And that's the ego too. Always looking to see, oh, am I on top of the pile? Am I the head of the class? Am I enlightened yet? Can I meditate longer than anyone else? Can I exercise? Can I? And this I is for the person. It's for the personal self. And so to detach and watch that is an exercise of its own right. It's a way in which you can be in the moment, and you can smile by yourself and say, wow, I don't think like I did last week, or wow, I wonder what that means. It's questioning yourself very gently, not like being your own parent. You don't want to be your own parent. You just want to be collectively part of a whole, and it's an information pool that has physical interpretations, but it's really not about that. It's about the heart, and about knowing that humans have been incarnating for a very long time on the planet of Earth in order to discover the truth of their being, which means their physical time body is not the truth of who they are. No matter what's going on in the world, how threatening it feels, it's not the truth. Everybody will drop the body. Right? Everybody will get dropped, so to speak, and be like, well, where did I go? And look at that. And I'm still looking at the same tree, but where's my body? So have joy with that. Recognize this is a waste of my time right now. I have only so much time in this time body. How am I going to spend it? And smile, right? And look around and say, right, that looks very clever to me, but I'm sure the divine is far more clever and has a solution to this. And you always look past the dilemma on the physical plane, look into the subtlety of your heart and the subtleties of the divine nature and say, all right, I turn it over, I surrender. I am not attached to the outcome, but I trust that it is for my highest good as well as the highest good of all humans, and therefore ultimately it is in the highest, most expansive position of light exploding into a new reality. Yes?